All roads lead to power, and on this show we're going to break that idea down a little bit. What is power? Who has it? And how do you get it? I'm your host, Jeff Coulard. Welcome to the show.
Is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic.
Because the so-called real world of men and money and power hums merrily along on the fuel of fear and anger and frustration and craving and the worship of self. The really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline.
If people don't learn power, people don't wake up. And if they don't wake up, they get left out.
Okay, welcome to Powerful, the live stream edition. Again, my name is Jeff Coulard and I am your host. And today I'm really excited about the conversation that I'm going to have and that you're going to listen in on and that you're going to have essentially with my good friend and colleague and mentor in a lot of ways, Vince Fowler. Vince has an incredible history of personal and professional development, from time spent in the military to time spent as a rugby coach and player at a high level to his work now as an executive and business coach. And he's just got a ton of insight and a ton of wisdom in what it takes to grow and change and to help other people grow and change. And so I'm really excited about today's episode. And what I would love is for you to engage in the conversation as well. And so if you're watching this live on Facebook or YouTube, don't hesitate to drop into the comments any thoughts or questions or ideas that you have about the topics that we're talking about. If you have questions for Vince or I, we will happily answer them on air. And so this is a bit of a choose your own adventure. If you'd like us to really dig into something important to you, we can definitely do that. But we've got some great questions and discussions planned with Vince. So without further ado, welcome Vince Fowler.
Hello, sir.
Thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure to connect with you.
My pleasure. Absolute pleasure. I would not hesitate to share a little airtime with you.
Yeah, well, I always enjoy our conversations, and you're actually a returning guest. You were one of the very first guests on Powerful when it was just a podcast, and now that it's a live stream, I thought I'd have to have you back on so people can see your beautiful face and your Scotch collection.
There it is. Oop, there it is. There's some, anyways. Yes. Don't tell my wife.
Yeah, no, I won't. I definitely won't.
I think she's watching though, so it's all good.
Yeah. So today I was really hoping that we could dig into some key ideas that you have and that we've talked lots about around this idea of embracing the suck. And I see you're wearing your t-shirt and we've got the hashtag on your name as well. So why don't we just start there and we can orient the viewer a little bit to what does that actually mean? What are we talking about when you say embrace the suck, and why? Why is this an important philosophy for you? And then maybe we'll dig into your backstory and some of the experiences you've had.
Sure. So two things. One, what it is and what it is not. And so let's just start with the latter. What embrace the suck is not to diminish or devalue the very painful experience that someone is going through. And it's also not to compare either. Someone was talking about their own traumatic experience with me the other day, and they were comparing it to mine. And it's like I'm not trying to say I have the same challenge you have. And I said, whoa, pain is pain, trauma is trauma, suck is suck. This is not a comparison game. So it's not that, and it's not a permission slip to tell people, hey, just embrace the suck. It's kind of like it's absent of some context, and it's not to say suck it up buttercup either. What embracing the suck is to acknowledge that what we're going through right here, right now is painful. To what degree is up to the individual experiencing it, but it is painful. So it's not to diminish the pain. It's not to devalue the pain. It's not to dehumanize the pain. And to recognize what it really, really is. Suck is an opportunity to, if we're aware, there's going to be some growth here. There's going to be some learning. There's going to be some innovation. There's going to be when we have shared suffering. So jump school in the military sucks. There's nothing really enjoyable about the 2 weeks of ground school we go through, and then the jump stage is fun. We jump out of an aircraft, but the actual jump stage is really uncomfortable, incredibly difficult, very painful physically and mentally. And so but that shared pain with the other people on my jump course, that actually gives us strength. The shared pain when we're doing wind sprints and rugby practice gives us strength. The shared pain, well, maybe not shared pain, but the experience of childbirth. I did not feel the physical pain that my wife did, but that shared experience reduces the pain, and it gives meaning to the pain. Put our hands in an ice bucket of water, and just set a timer. How long can we keep the hand in the ice bucket of water? Well, some people might last a few seconds, some a few minutes. But if we said for every second that you have your hand in this ice bucket of water, we are going to donate 10 cents to XYZ charity. Well, all of a sudden, we're going to have a marathon of people putting up with all sorts of pain and misery because it has meaning, it has purpose. So it's ultimately what I encourage people is to, how do we reframe this experience that really sucks? So.
Okay. Because I was wondering that, because I think there is, on the surface, if you just hashtag embrace the suck, there is a little bit of that suck it up, buttercup, pain is good, a little bit of that macho kind of attitude. And I imagine you run into that with a military history and a rugby history.
Sure.
It could be easy to go down that path. But I also know through our conversations that, you talk a lot about vulnerability. You talk a lot about empathy. You talk a lot about things that are not typical kind of macho hashtag embrace the suck. So it's a really interesting, our conversations are always full of juxtapositions for me. And so I'm sure that the viewer will get a little bit of that today, but let's back up. Let's rewind a little bit and maybe kick off, like, who is Vince Fowler and how did he get to be a business coach?
So great question. I'm born and raised in Williams Lake, BC, grew up with my mother, my grandmother. For the most part, I think this is pretty awesome. I move around a lot, though. In a very small town, there's in a very small town, about 15,000 people. By the time I'm in grade 6, I'm actually attending my 8th school number 8. And there's a lot of bullying that I experienced as a kid, like really, really significant bullying. And so grade 6, there's a classmate's doing a presentation on D-Day, paratroopers jumping into World War II. I knew nothing about this, and immediately identified with paratroopers. I said, I'm going to be a paratrooper. So just kind of over my head, there's a little jumper on a pedestal there. That's something we get when we leave the airborne. So at the time I was like, I'm going to be a paratrooper. And that way no one can pick on me. That way no one can pick on others. And I thought, up until even 6 months ago, I thought I was joining the military to pick fights with bullies. So, but the real reason I joined the military was actually to feel safe. But that only became apparent in my life about 6 months ago. So I joined the military. I go to jump school. I become a paratrooper, infantry paratrooper, deployment to Somalia, 6-month deployment to Somalia, get out. When the regiment is disbanded, I go into sales, and with no experience really in sales, I'm selling photocopiers, which is door to door downtown Edmonton, and then later at Calgary. Just knocking on the door. Hey, I'm Vince from Icon. Do you want to buy a photocopier, fax machine kind of thing? And I actually get escorted out of a couple buildings. That's no solicitation. I just, whether it's dyslexia or just disregard, just walk right past. And so, for 9 years of business to business selling, business to consumer selling, if that relationship was a woman, we had a terrible falling out, a big divorce. And I ended up recruited to a private school, coaching private school students in athletics. Character development was just sort of a given, but the athletics of the game rugby and then just smart ways to work out in the gym. And then 2008, the economy kind of crashes. We really feel it in Calgary. I lose my job and I spend 16 months unemployed. And I'll tell you, that really sucked. I really lost my identity is what happened. And looking back, I've been told that I was experiencing a major depression disorder. So I was told, It's in remission, they say. I mean, I didn't even notice it, but I knew it sucked. It just sucked really hard. I didn't know how else to describe it. From there, I ended up, eventually my wife sat me down and says, look, if you don't get a job in 3 months, like we're screwed by Christmas, like royally screwed. So this was August, and in a month I had a job. Turned out to be at a business coaching firm with some other coaches, and people had all sorts of brick and mortar clients, like home builders and HVAC manufacturers and distributors and all sorts of stuff, healthcare, everything. And I ended up doing business development for them, and then from there I got certified. Initially a business coach, really wrapped around the mechanics of a business. So if you think of a car, we put gas in it, that's money, and it works. So we have an engine and we have a transmission and we have a drive shaft. And so in business, all these things exist as well. We have marketing and conversion, which equals customers, and we have average dollar sale and number of transactions, that equals revenue. Multiply that by a margin, that equals profit. So there's the chassis of a business. But as time went on, I became more and more interested in the way the individual that owns the business, the way they think, the way they act, the way they behave. And initially I was told that you're not a life coach, you're a business coach, stop going there. But I left the firm after about a year and a half, and I went on my own. And so I just naturally gravitated more and more and more into the psychology of the business owner. And for lots of different reasons, and that's where I live now. I definitely understand the mechanics of business. What I ultimately care is, so for me, I thought I had this whole personal professional development program dialed, right? And until I didn't.
We're going to dig into that in a second, I think. First, I want to say hi to Judith, because Judith says hi, Vince and Jeff. So hi, Judith. Thank you for tuning in.
Judith is this lady's a rock star. This lady she should be a poster child for Embrace the Suck herself. This lady knows how to deal with the suck in real time. So glad she's here.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. And for everybody else who's tuned in, feel free to say hi and feel free to ask questions. And so Vince and I are talking about embracing the suck and personal development and psychology and mindset around being a business owner. And if you have any questions at all as they come up, don't hesitate to just throw them into the comments and we will get to them in real time. But actually, I want to back up. Hi, John. John says hi. Nice to see you. Thanks for tuning in.
Johnny Odell, just so you know, he and I were in the airborne together. We infantry together, airborne together, Somalia together. He and I go way, way back. So Johnny, man, good to see you.
Thanks for being here. Yeah. And Matt, we'll just say hi to Matt. Nice to see you.
Hello, Matt.
Thanks for tuning in.
Another in real time deals with suck stuff. Matt's a solid dude.
Awesome. And your wife. I got to say hi to Danita. Thanks for lending your husband out for the evening and letting them chat.
Always. She's my greatest advocate for Vince. She's fantastic.
Awesome. Well, let's back up a little bit because you mentioned it on the first podcast around the unemployment in between the Edge School and going into business coaching, right? There's that 16-month gap there, and there's the come to Jesus talk with Danita around it's time to we got to go. How important, and you talked a little bit about shared suffering with and shared pain and the meaning behind that shared pain. I'm interested in let me frame this question. It's in my head and I'm going to try and frame it as best I can. How important is it for you to think about personal growth and development, not from just as an individual, but as a unit or as with other people in your life? Because I think that's one of my, just to give full disclosure, I get frustrated with a lot of personal development that's very individualistic in nature, that doesn't take into account that actually the change you made, we can thank Danita for
sure
a good portion of that, or we can thank your children for a good portion of that. I know that I have people in my life that drive a lot of that. So how do we do that? How do we do personal development in relationship with other people? That's a big loaded question, but what are your thoughts on it?
I think a fast answer is vulnerability. Vulnerability and shared pain. And I didn't come up with that on my own. I stole that from Brene Brown. So in the military, you have no choice but to be vulnerable, to recruit your friends, your teammates, because one of the things that the military is exceptionally great at is that there is no way anyone can get through basic training or infantry school or jump school or whatever the training is. There's no way to do it by yourself. One is too small of a number to like inspire a movement, climb Mount Everest, and move a piano. Like what you cannot do it by yourself. So you must, and I say that absolutely, you must recruit the people around you to make it. There's this survival of the fittest narrative out there. No, it's sort of an incomplete sentence. It's survival of those who stayed together. Those who just left the tribe and said, screw you, survival of the fittest, died in 48 hours. They probably got eaten by a lion or something. So we need our tribe. And in the military, that tribe is with you 24/7 for basic training. It's 10 weeks. For infantry school, it's 16 weeks. So you get real good at being vulnerable, which, according to Brene Brown's research, is risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. There is no hiding the fact that you miss your family when you're spending the first 6 months of your military career away from them. There's no hiding from the fact that you're carrying an injury, whether it's a blister or a pulled groin. There's no hiding from the fact that your fitness level is not up to snuff, and other people have to make up for it by doing laps around the slowest person on the run. Like there's just no hiding. So Hollywood kind of messes people up. Rambo is all about one man who goes off and takes on the cartel, takes on whoever, the triad, and that's just not real. Liam Neeson, when his daughter's taken, like Liam Neeson all by himself, single-handedly, the Czech underground, he goes and rescues his daughter. Like that shit doesn't happen in real life. We do it together. So yeah, shared pain. And when we share pain together, when pain is shared, there's this pressure valve that gets released because we're not all carrying it. And just that vulnerability of risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure, knowing that I can share whatever I want right here, right now, and my teammates aren't going to kick me out of the tent into the minus 55-degree weather. A friend of mine, we were in Somalia, he received a Dear John letter, meaning his girlfriend wrote him and said, hey, we're done. And my friend Chris was devastated, as you would imagine, because that relationship was rock solid prior. I mean, so we all thought prior to deployment. So, we were there to console him. We all read the letter. We all took turns writing a letter back, and then, it wasn't long. Chris was kind of having a laugh, and yes, it was still painful, but we felt pain for him. And so together we survived that experience together a whole lot better.
It's interesting that I don't usually associate vulnerability in the military, right? Like those aren't two things that I think the average layperson wouldn't equate the two, and probably wouldn't pull that into their work as a business owner or as a leader or even as a parent or spouse, right? Like there's still, I think, a conversation around vulnerability, especially, let's face it, as men, around how that runs counter to some dominant narratives in society about what it means to be a man.
For sure. Right now, in the moment of just thinking about it, I really struggle to think of a lot of male figures just in Calgary. I think if we all go online, we're all going to see this guy and that guy. But if we look into the city of Calgary, who's a poster child for male vulnerability? Right now, Graham Sherman, Toolshed Beer, he might be one. He's definitely talked about a lot of challenges as a business owner. Actually, Matt Boudreau is he's not very shy about talking about the challenges. He just left a career working in banking, and now he's a co-owner of 521 Coffee. He's a partner there, and plus he's got his own coaching practice. So he does a lot of really nice, great blogging and writing, and he talks about vulnerability all the time. But it just immediately to come to mind, if you think of some well-known Calgarians, I don't see it. I saw a lot of hurt Calgarians. I see a lot of hurt men hurting other men and hurting other people in their community. But there's this mantra of like, suck it up, buttercup, and just get on with it. And, in the military, we'd say, reach down, squeeze your nuts and soldier on. Not always helpful. I get the sentiment, but not always helpful.
Not the most helpful advice. Yeah. Let's
No.
let's talk a little bit about pain and processing pain, and whether that's, I think probably emotional pain is what we're talking about when it comes to vulnerability and kind of most personal development. There's obviously the physical pain aspect that you'd be familiar with from, military and athletics. There's no shortage of physical pain. But I think let's talk a little bit about emotional pain and
Sure.
and processing it, because I think that it's embracing the suck actually means like embracing the pain and processing it, finding some purpose, finding some meaning, but not having it accidentally leak out and hurt other people. Like when you say hurt men,
Yeah.
hurting other men, like, or hurting other people, like that's a phenomenon for sure. What are some practices maybe that you have for processing emotions or pain, or things that you've learned or things you're practicing actively?
The very biggest one, the most important one right out of the gate is share the pain with someone who's earned the right to hear the story. Trying to manage, psychological pain, emotional pain all by oneself, incredibly difficult to do. And so, you and I, for example, in some of our divergent friends, we've reached out to each other. Hey, like, hey, Jeff, so is trauma treatment supposed to feel like this? Like share that pain with those who have earned the right to hear the story versus someone who goes on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever, and just does that emotional dump, that emotional download that has yet to be processed. That is like, shining a light and directly into someone's eyeball, and they just, and they look away, like, I don't know what to do with all that. But if we, when we, for example, you and I, when we share our emotional struggles that we're experiencing in real time, the other person's prepared for it and they know what to do with it. And they're there to listen. They're not there to fix. And that's, a practice my wife and I have got, with Danita and I will say, hey, I've got something to share and I just need you to listen. I don't need to fix anything. I just need you to listen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. And two, people are going to probably roll their eyes when I say this one, but Netflix. Watch a lot of Netflix. I'm kidding. Don't do that. That's called numbing and running. For me, it's exercise. So I'm not going to say this is everyone's thing, but I'm sure some people will still roll their eyes. But I got to a point where I've been in, I would say, we've all heard of intermittent fasting. So I was intermittent exercising. There's an eye roll from Matt.
I roll from Matt. Yeah.
So, but for me, it's daily weight resistant exercise. And I'm on, I don't know, Friday was day 42. So today's day 45, I guess. But the psychological impact on the human brain from physical exercise is undisputed. And even the newest research today that's well documented and peer reviewed by many neuroscientists, neurobiology. It's just short of there being some sort of disconnect in the brain and someone has a real, say, traumatic brain injury. For me, exercise is definitely the sweet spot. So every single day, whether I'm up at 5:36 or a little bit later on the weekends, I'm going for a physical workout. I'm there for 45 minutes. That is, and followed by meditation. Again, I'm not telling everybody to meditate, but I do every single day. Those three things: who earned the right to hear my story, physical exercise. It's the world's greatest antidepressant, and meditation. And those three things I will do for the rest of my life. Yeah, they're that important to me.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And we'll probably dig in to some more tips and strategies and resources and things that you've experienced. We do have some comments, so I'm going to throw them up on the screen, and we can chat about them. So here's another one from Matt, which pertains to our conversation a little ways back around toxic male mentality. What a great way to lead to failure or burnout. Absolutely. The individual narrative that you just need to suck it up and, be a man, I think, is responsible for all kinds of unintended poor outcomes for men and for the people around them.
there's this idea and speed of the leader, speed of the pack. So when the leader of whether it's the leader of the house or the leader of the community or the company or the team, when the leader basically says, "Suck it up, Buttercup," are you hurt? Or are you just being a pussy? That kind of language stifles, kills vulnerability, and it basically tells everybody, "I am not safe to disclose that I'm hurting. If I disclose that I'm in pain, physical pain, emotional pain, I'm out of the unit, I'm out of the team, I'm out of the family." And that's scary, right? Because we're also wired for belonging. And, shit, I worked all my youth to be a member of the airborne regiment. Suddenly going some, here I am deployed to Somalia. John, you're on the line. You can relate to this. I'm really struggling. I'm missing relationships from back home. I've got a rash I cannot describe. I'm frustrated with leadership, not so much in our platoon, but certainly in our commando and the regiment itself. And I'm just pissed off all the time, but I can't say anything because if I do, shut up, pussy is the language, right? I'm not trying to be, that's the language. And so all it does is kills morale. It kills the narrative in the house. And in my own mind, I think, well, what's wrong with me? Like, am I broken? Everyone else here looking around, everyone else seems to have their act together except for me. Maybe I am just this weak, shitty human. And that narrative is not helpful, never will be helpful. That'll lead to all sorts of challenges.
There's no road that leads us out from that question, like what's wrong with me question. I work with a lot of teachers. In fact, today I was working with a group of teachers. I work with a lot of helping professionals, addictions counselors, kind of across the gamut, and corporate leaders. And that's my number one thing. I'm like, I never want a kid or any person, but particularly kids, to ever wonder what's wrong with them and why they're broken, because that leads us on a journey of trying to figure that out and trying to fix ourselves. And there's lots of quick promised fixes out there, from addiction to the self-help aisle, that spectrum of trying to fix what's broken. There's no way to come back from that, or there's no good path down that. There has to be that, that little bit of, and maybe this is a segue into some questions, which I'm going to think about while I put some other comments up, because I want to acknowledge our viewers and thank you for coming out, and you've got great things to say. So Terry is glad to hear Vince's wisdom again. So a repeat.
Terry Becker, you're good.
Judith back says, when we're talking about sharing the pain with someone who's in your arena, and that's very much that's Brené's language, and it's from a quote, I believe. I forget who the quote is. Roosevelt, maybe Theodore Roosevelt. Yeah,
Roosevelt's right on my wall, right there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. People who are in the arena, and then Heather is concurring.
Heather.
What is this? The Vince Fowler? Is this the Vince Fowler fan club hour? Is everybody who's watching this?
Oh, Heather and I go way back. Because of her, I drove my elbow through a fish tank. I was changing in my bedroom, and her and her sister surprised me, and I was literally in the midst of putting on my shorts, and it startled me, and I shocked, and I drove an elbow right through the side of a fish tank, and goldfish everywhere.
Who knew we'd be talking about that story? But thanks for being here, Heather. Thanks for joining us. All right. So let's talk a little bit about trauma, because I think that's a topic that when we talk about masculinity and when we talk about leadership, we talk about life in general.
Yeah,
we don't give a lot of airtime, I think, to trauma, or at least we don't do it outside of, like, I talk about trauma all the time, but my background's in addiction and mental health, and that's a narrative, and it's a conversation we have. And I know that you've been doing some trauma work, and you've been working through trauma and experiencing post-traumatic growth. And so maybe fill us in on your experience and thinking, and particularly helpful resources or things that you've experienced that have been most helpful, because I firmly believe that we all carry trauma. Like there's capital T trauma, very obvious. We can point to it and say that was traumatic. And there's little t trauma of asking ourselves too many times, what's wrong with us? Why are we broken? Shame stories. Like there's a there's a spectrum there of trauma. And so I don't think it matters. I think being human just in 2020 means experiencing some trauma. And so let's talk about that. Like, what is it? And maybe, or not even what is it, but like, what's your relationship like to it? Because you mentioned, 6 months ago, there was a shift in your personal development journey.
Yeah.
I'd love to dig into it.
Let's go there. I grow up, I do my thing, I join the army, and I'm thinking, like I said, I'm joining the army to pick fights with bullies. And what I only discovered 6 months ago is that wasn't the underpinning reason. The underpinning reason was I wanted to feel safe. And so when I realized that, it was an emotional experience. Like, we're talking snot bubbling tears and Kleenex and everything. But also a rebirth in many ways. So I grew up, and it's almost 3 years ago now. My wife Danita got me an Ancestry DNA kit, and we've got it she got it for both of us. So we spit in a tube and send it off to Ireland, Ancestry DNA. And just prior to the results, like when I was 17, I met my birth father. And so I'm adopted by my dad, Ralph Fowler. That's how I got my name. But my real name at birth was this Vincent Lampert kid. So I even got my little mini baseball. And the results essentially are, my birth father is not my birth father. John Grant is not my birth father. And I was like caught way off guard. And I'm like, what is this? So long story short, turns out I'm actually a Brecknock, Don Brecknock. And I won't get into all the, what happened 48 years ago when it all happened. But essentially just all of a sudden, it completely rocked my world. Who am I? I had no idea. Am I a Lampert? Am I a Fowler? Am I a Grant? Am I a Brecknock? Who am I? And in the process of that, now I'm having a conversation with my dad, with my birth father, and I'm saying, John, guess what? You're not my dad. I've got 3 sisters and a brother. Like, this is the new reality. And of course, they all say, well, you're still my son, you're still my brother. And I return, yeah, you're still my dad, you're still my siblings. And so over the next 2.5 years, things in my life start to unravel, like from the inside out. And in the beginning, like, I've got military coping mechanisms, I got athletic coping mechanisms, I got professional coping mechanisms for my own industry. And I got a library of, 100 some books, and most of them I read twice, all around psychology and everything. And I'm unraveling from the inside out. And it's like a death of 1,000 cuts. So you wouldn't know it from one day to the next, but you'd know it on a sliding scale, month over month. As it turns out, I have a cousin, Martin Brecknock. He lives he lives in Hong Kong, and he says, hey, can you get me some poppies? I say, sure. I go to the Legion, I pick some up, I'm going to mail them to him. And in the process of picking them up, there's a case officer there, and we bump into each other. We start to chat. Turns out we know a common friend. Turns out was who my platoon commander in Somalia. So we just sit down and we shoot the shit. And, he checks in on me. Like, I've got a foot pension. I've got a tooth pension. So, he's like, and all these little innocent conversations lead to a question that he asks. How'd you like to spend some time at the OSI clinic with our team? Which is code for, how would you like to see a psychologist at the operational stress injury clinic, post-traumatic stress? Well, my immediate response is, hell yeah, if I can get some free psych and share with my buddies and my clients, sign me up. So 5 weeks later, I'm in the sitting in front of these psychologists, and 4 hours later, I am completely unraveled. Like, throw a ball of yarn in the room and it's nothing but a long thread now. And I'm a mess. I'm emotionally just destroyed. And 2 weeks later, I come back and it's a 17-page report, post-traumatic stress disorder. One of the things I really appreciate about our relationship, Jeff, is you helped me refrain all of that to it's a stress response. And man, oh man, was that ever helpful. I very much dislike the word disorder. I already have ADHD, which is a learning difference, not a learning disorder. But to read post-traumatic stress disorder, I was incredibly uncomfortable. First of all, how could this be possible? I've been out of the military for 23 years. I went on one deployment, not a combat tour. We had a couple little, shootouts. I would, a couple rounds fired here and there, but nothing significant. We had, outside of that, nothing significant. I have many, many friends who were killed in Afghanistan on combat tours. So how could this be true? It's been so long. How could this be true? I mean, first of all, I'm a high level athlete in my past. I got my shit together. How could this be true? And all I can say is that my two psychologists at the OSI clinic, and all they deal with is military and RCMP veterans, and just layer by layer, like peeling back an onion, just layer by layer by layer, they just started like taking this all apart. And so embrace this suck was already a phrase in my life, has been for a long time. It's military slang. If we Google it, to consciously accept and appreciate something that is extremely unpleasant, yet unavoidable for forward progression. So going back to who's earned the right to hear this story, my wife, you, our other divergent friends. Exercise very quickly, well, not quickly, but exercise did become an intervention for me. And meditation was already there. I just amped it up. And when people ask me today, hey, Vince, how are you doing? I can honestly say, I can look them in the eye and I can say, I've never felt better. But there was a time going into this, everything was destroyed in my life. Oh, the other piece, I'm a fraud. Who in the world is going to believe, especially my friends who have 30 plus years and multiple combat tours, if they ever find out that I'm playing the PTSD card, they're probably going to visit me in the middle of the night and stab me. Like, I'm being slightly facetious, but that's the narrative. That's the narrative. I mean, that's not true, but that's the narrative. No one's going to believe me. They're going to think I'm just milking the system. So, and it took me a while to even disclose this to my clients. I eventually did, and I disclosed to all of them. And Judith, you're on the call today. When I told Judith, Judith has actually seen a couple meltdowns of mine. I mean, usually it's my client melting down in front of me, but in this particular case, Judith has earned the right to hear my story. And one day she just said, she could tell, how are you doing? And this is before the diagnosis. It's like, I have no idea who I am right now. And I was working through this whole who's my daddy business. So there's the experience with trauma, and I've been putting my life back together one emotion at a time. No joke. This is not here just for entertainment's sake, but this emotional wheel is by my desk, on my desk at all times, because one of the layers we pulled back is my relationship with anger. I didn't have a relationship with anger, not a functional one. I can deal with fear and surprise and happiness and sadness and disgust, but I had a very, very unhealthy relationship with anger. We're talking some pretty epic passive aggressive behaviors when I get angry. In rugby, I can punch people. No one really cares except for the person getting punched. But ruined. So putting myself back together, one emotion, one feeling at a time. Real deal, man.
It's a journey, and I appreciate you sharing it with me and the listeners. And I know a lot of the listeners on the live call are people that are close to you or that are friends of yours. And actually, I want to throw Matt's given us a high five, double high five. So thanks Matt. Man. And he also says, and I agree with this, that anyone that knows Vince knows he would not milk the system ever. So that's important to that narrative. Yeah. Right. But it's interesting, the narrative that we carry, the stories that we carry, and sometimes the disconnection between what's true, and then some hearts from Judith. So thank you, Judith. So thinking about the journey, like what I'm curious. I've got a couple of curiosities, and we can tackle them in any order. And I should, as a better host, I would ask them one at a time, but I got to dump them out on you now. So just you have to deal. What's the sign of an unraveling life? And so I'm curious about some of like a bit more like, what was it that was unraveling for you, and how did you know? Because I think particularly in this time, like we're all the threshold stress baseline, I believe, has just shifted. the people I'm talking with, the clients that I'm talking to, like the stress levels are just higher. The like the full stress load that we're all carrying
Yeah.
is just
Yeah.
elevated. And I see behaviors in myself. And I think, when I talk to you and I talk to some of our divergent friends who are all pretty disciplined, we've got some athletes, we've got coaches, we've got like a wide range of folks. And when I start to suffer, when my habits start to slip, when things start to unravel a little bit for me, I'm like, ooh, like shit, like I'm usually pretty disciplined. And so the fact that I gained 10 pounds through COVID, that would be unraveling in my
Yeah.
world, right? It's like, that's not good. So that's a curiosity. Maybe we'll just start there. How does somebody know what unraveling means or looks like? And then what are some action steps on the front end of the journey? Maybe would be a curiosity.
So the unraveling for me is numbing behaviors. Could be Netflix, could be just incessant scrolling on Facebook. Facebook's my social application, social drug of application or whatever. Facebook's the drug. I'm very active and proactive on LinkedIn, but I don't get lost in it. And I don't really get lost in Instagram either. But Facebook, I can get lost in. Picking fights in dumpster fires on social media. Who's right? Who's wrong? What's, completely unproductive experience. Withdraw, like complete and utter withdraw from friends, from family members, including sometimes my kids, hiding. There's been points where through November, December, and even I think even parts of January where Monday I typically don't have client meetings, and so Mondays would just all stack up. Also, I have my sessions with my OSI clinic psychologist. So Mondays were incredibly difficult to get out of bed, and I couldn't willpower my way out of bed. And then, of course, the narrative inside my head, like, get out of bed, jerk, get out of bed, you lazy bastard, get out of bed, descriptor, and none of those are healthy. And then not disclosing any of this to my wife, right? Not disclosing any of this to Danita. And so here she is walking around thinking, my narrative is clearly has to be her, right? Like, in the absence of data, we make up a story. And her story started to think, well, what am I as a wife doing wrong? And I was like, Jesus, like, you're not doing anything wrong. I'm the mess up in this relationship. I'm the screw up here. So, and then emotional eating, like, I've buried a lot of chocolate bar wrappers and a lot of bag of chip wrappers in the garbage in the garage between getting out of the car and then coming into the house. So those are just some. One of the things that I'm very grateful for is my drug of choice has never been alcohol or drugs, because back to that relationship with anger, I do not want angry Vince to show up. So I would never influence angry Vince by taking any kind of a drug or alcohol. So I've always been really disciplined in that area, never to drink when I'm sad. I drink when I'm happy, and I'll have a little dram of scotch or something, but never that. So that's the unraveling part, and those are just some pieces of it. The second part of your question, remind me again.
Just the front end of the journey for people when they see an unraveling or they're feeling a bit of an unraveling. What are some action steps that you've found helpful, or when you get to that point where it's like, oh shit, I think there's maybe something that I need some help with, because I think as a coach you probably are on the receiving end of requests for help, as somebody who's also sought help, like, you're in an interesting position to have some insight into what some of the barriers are to asking for help and some proactive strategies to.
Sure. So you and we share our Divergence Peer Advisory Group. So the OSI clinic's already built in. Veterans Affairs is taking care of that, but that's once a week. And as Divergence in our peer advisory group, we meet monthly, but we check in weekly. And so I would say to anybody is, for me, what I did is I started checking in more often weekly. And one of the questions in our peer advisory group is, what's an area that I need help in? And I'd say, I just need you to reach out. I need you to check in on me. So I've got my wife checking in on me. I've actually got a couple clients now starting to check in on me. How are you doing? Which is a really bit of an odd experience when my clients are checking in on me. Um, I've got the meditation. I started to amp up the meditation. I started some like in the beginning of COVID. COVID was actually for us, it was excellent because it brought us together. It didn't tear us apart. So I saw my kids more. I saw my wife more. There was significantly less travel. I was putting on about 3,000 kilometers a month, and I went to 200 kilometers a month. Basic, which was just groceries. So, um, so for me, that was just innately built into the routine. Was surrounded by family, and then my relationships with you and the rest of our divergent colleagues. So to anybody, I would say if you don't have a really strong network, I also have another group of men in my life that I've been a part of for a very long time, but I had actually withdrawn from this. So we talked about what does unraveling look like. I withdrew from a men's group I participated in for about 6 years, 7 years, but I still maintain individual relationships with inside of that. So a few of them have checked in on me. They're very familiar with my diagnosis. Um, but back to those three things, share with people who have earned the right to hear the story. And exercise wasn't yet a part of it, but my wife and I and our kids, we were walking around the pond, going from bike rides. I started doing mountain bike riding on my own, and then just the daily meditation. And there's a few guided ones. Sarah Blondin is actually out of Vancouver Island. So her voice and her narratives, her scripts are just they were exactly a perfect prescription for where my headspace was. And then slowly started to reach out to a couple army buddies that I know well over the years, and I just said, "Hey, guess what?" Hoping I didn't get kicked out of the tribe, and of course, I didn't. But that has been very helpful. So we chat now and then about that too.
Mhm. Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, there's some great insights there. Like a little bit of a fix, back to, the foundations of what works. And I think having, for you, you've got a little bit of a blueprint. And I think we probably all have a little bit of a blueprint for like what could work for us, what's worked in the past. Few viewer questions, so I'm going to throw them up on the screen, and we can maybe tackle those.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to keep you away from Danita too long tonight. It's a
Oh,
Monday night, so I'm sure there's work tomorrow. So we'll
yeah. I
get to
I
sit
would
and drink
preface
scotch
all of
and
this too.
talk.
Yeah, I'd preface all of this too that there is no one way. There is no one way. There's just a way.
Mhm.
There's no one way that post-traumatic stress presents itself. There's no one way that alcoholism presents itself or drug addiction presents itself. There's just no one way. Therefore, there's no one way for treatment. And when someone says, "This is the way," I'd say, "Well, that might be your way, but I'm perfectly comfortable to say it ain't my way." So someone else could say, "Dude, I'm not going to work out. I'm not going to share. I'm not going to do this." Well, I would say you probably should share because even in AA, what do? They sit and share. Um, but I think there's some pretty good science around exercise. I think there's some pretty good science around meditation, but still, there's no one way. There's just a way. I don't know if I froze, but Jeff, you look like you froze.
Am I back? I look like I'm
You're
back.
back.
I'm on patchy internet, so apologies to those who are tuning into the live stream if we're getting choppy or interrupted. Thank you for hanging in tight and sticking with us. So there's a question actually here from Ryan, who I'm going to put it up on the screen, and you and I can
Sure.
maybe take a stab at it. So let's see. Could you revisit youth mental health and small t trauma? I've noticed that COVID isolation has affected teens. What will be tips for the pre-adults? So that we
That's a great question for Jeff to answer if his internet works out. He's on Airbnb in Lethbridge. So I know Jeff, I'll just talk because I can. Jeff was talking about sort of little t, big T, sort of little trauma, big trauma. I don't know if it was necessarily age relevant,
still
but
Still streaming.
Yep. So I was
Okay.
just kind of answering for you, but you take over. I said your little T, big T wasn't necessarily age relevant. It was just sort of, trauma is trauma, but some is pretty significant. But yeah, I think Ryan's question, by the way, shout out to Ryan. This is where my swag comes from. So just received my order today of 55 t-shirts and some hats. So all this beautiful swag. Shout out to Level 2 Sportswear and Ryan Berry, who him and his team are amazing.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to getting mine. I was hoping to have it for this conversation so that we could both wear our t-shirts.
Sorry,
But I'll just have to have you back on the show. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely offer some thoughts and some insight. This is probably a topic all on its own. Teenagers and trauma and things like that. But where to start? When I think about problems, I need to make sure, it's really important for me in the work that I do is understanding what's a problem and what's a symptom of a problem. Because oftentimes what we call the problem, what we affix the problem label to, is actually a symptom of the problem, or it's a coping mechanism, or it's a numbing, or it's an escape, or it's a whatever. So, about a dozen years of working with teenagers in addictions treatment, they'd come to the program because they had an addiction problem. And we actually would rarely talk about addiction. We'd rarely talk about drug use. We would talk about what is it they care about and why, how does drug use make sense for you given this? And I think that lens, that reframe around making sure that we accurately locate the problem if we're experiencing one with teenagers in particular goes a long way, because what ends up happening often for parents, and I'm assuming there's a question here for Ryan around some kids of his own or some kids that he knows, and looking at like what's a symptom and what's a problem, because oftentimes we'll try and tackle what we think is the problem only to then run into resistance or withdrawal, right? And that's kind of what ends up happening. So and if we don't accurately name the problem and recruit the teenager or the young person in accurately locating and naming the problem for them, right, we risk misusing our power to try and fix a problem that's actually just a symptom of something else that's going on, and we risk damaging the relationship. And that's ended up being a lot of the work that we did in addictions treatment was actually just family reconstruction therapy, which is like, let's get back on the same page. Let's get differentiating between behaviors that might be coping mechanisms for stress, especially isolation, like COVID, like that, again, that base stress level is so much higher now. But that for sure, naming a problem is really important, and versus symptom.
Well, one of the behaviors that I displayed in Somalia was just a certain amount of insubordination and a certain amount of just really off bad humor. And a lot of this was that was my top level behavior. And you would think I was just, well, maybe didn't get enough sleep, or maybe didn't, wasn't being fed enough or whatever. But the underlying problem to all of this was actually, I did not feel safe. And this actually tethers back to my childhood where I was rarely safe. So we won't go there because it's not why we're here, but we were deployed without a redeployment date. That's one. Like, we left on the December 19, my platoon. Anyways, me and Johnny, our commando, we left on that timeline. So Johnny and I are in the same platoon, Johnny Odell, and we left without a redeployment date. That doesn't really happen. We left without maps. Where in the world do we go on deployment without a map? And our comm sets, the Americans had little small 4 or 5 pound comm sets, and we had these heavy 25-pound World War II, not quite World War II, definitely Vietnam era radio sets that were, we only had 1 per section and ultimately 5 per the platoon. Out of 35 men, we've got 5 radio sets. So if battery's dead or the backup battery's pooched, like, we're screwed. And how do we call in help when we've got no maps? So the level of, the level of uncertainty, the level of lack of safety was amplified so high in my head that it started to squeeze my behavior. Right. and like I said, there's some back history in life, but at any rate, so yeah, problem. We got to mine for the problem. We got to look for the problem. What tap rooting is another expression. If no one's ever heard of it, Google tap rooting about what's behind all of this. So,
Yeah, and I think people are probably familiar with like a trauma response around fight, flight, and freeze. That's kind of a classic. Like that's how we're wired when we experience danger, and lack of safety will punch the person, run away, or freeze. Like that's built into us as humans. I've developed a bit of an acronym for the subtler versions of that. It's called the RAW responses, RAW, and it's resistance, acquiescence, withdrawal. And so those are essentially the same, but not as dramatic. So you don't have to punch a wall to resist, right? Lots of teenagers resist their parents or resist their teachers, right? Sounds like you might have resisted your platoon commander a little bit, or you might have been a little bit of a resistor.
I was definitely resisting chain of command. I was really, really frustrated with the leadership in chain of command. It was inconsistent in some cases, not all, but certainly in some cases, it was beyond dysfunctional. And this is a military deployment, like in a world where we just don't, first of all, the internet didn't exist. So, supplies and resupply was limited. Another reason not to feel safe. We had open fire policies that were 1, 2, 3, 4, but am I still safe to do it? Am I still safe to follow up?
So safety, I think all roads. Yeah, I mean, all roads eventually, I think, lead to safety. Like we're wired to keep ourselves safe in a lot of ways. And so, again, so back to Ryan's question, just around, the effect on teens is to be really like observant of the behavior, and then, but not to label the behavior as the problem. To dig beneath the behavior to say, how does this make sense in light of this context around this teen maybe not feeling safe, or maybe the uncertainty of the world, or the disconnection from peers, or like there's going to be a driving force. And once we identify what the need is, we can hold on to that and try and meet that need, as opposed to try and quell the behavior. We spend a lot of time chasing behaviors in ourselves and in other people, as opposed to finding some of those root causes. So hopefully that's helpful, Ryan, but that's probably a podcast episode all in itself, is just talking about raising little people, parenting. It's a hard job. So how do we, this is a big conversation. And so I'm curious about what you want to leave off. Like, what do you want to leave our listeners with as far as a parting piece of advice, or a learning, or a story that illustrates some of these concepts? Anything you haven't mentioned yet that you have found helpful, whether that's a book or a podcast or a practice of yours.
I'll leave with two pieces. One's a story and one's a practice. So we hear a lot about negative thinking, and what is it? So just for a point of reference, we have 60,000 thoughts a day. We probably speak 150 words a minute, but we think, some research says 1,000 words a minute. I kind of double down on about 250 to 500 words a minute. Can't even comprehend 1,000 words a minute of thinking. So our thoughts are all over the place. And if you think of thoughts, think of them in terms of, if we make it oversimplified, let's just say 50% of our thoughts are probably negative. We really can't control that, because they're like pop-up windows on a web browser. They're just popping up all over the place, and 60,000 a day. That would just drive anybody nuts. What we can do, though, is we can introduce a new thought. We can kind of pin that thought in our browser. So we can't control initial negative thinking, but we can introduce a new thought. If all we did, and this is one of the things I took away, Trevor Moawad's book, It Takes What It Takes. So Trevor Moawad's the author. And one of the things I learned from him, perfect timing being in January, was that, when we say something in our mind and we say it out loud, it's amplified to a power of 10. But when it's negative, it's another 4 to 7 times more. So that's 40 to 70 times more greater than positive. And here's the situation, someone tells me I've got a post-traumatic stress diagnosis, or someone tells you, someone, listening, they find out that, they've they're diagnosed with cancer. Well, that sucks. And right now, we just can't say, well, come on, just be positive. I mean, that's going to repulse people. We're going to want to smoke them in the nose. So what's the alternative? Negative? No, we want to stay neutral. When things are going backwards, we can't, and like a car transmission, we just can't drive the transmission from going in reverse right into forward. We're going to wreck the tranny. So we got to put it into neutral, slow down, and then turn around and then go forward. So while positivity doesn't always work, negative always does, and it works negatively. So if we can just do one thing, well, we can't control the thoughts as well. We can pin a thought, introduce a new thought. Just don't voice negative thought out loud. So in my house, we adopted one of Trevor Moawad's sayings, and it's don't say stupid shit out loud. And so here's a real life example. Captain Smith, not his real name, he became the platoon commander of 5 Platoon in the regiment when Johnny and I were there. And on his very first jump, he broke his ankle. I forget which one, doesn't really matter. He broke his ankle. And so anybody breaks something, you go through the normal, medical procedure, get casted, all that jazz. So prior to jumping, you've got to go through an airborne refresher, which means more landing swings, more flight swings. And the big one's landing, because he broke his ankle on landing. Well, on the very next jump of the regiment, he breaks his other ankle. So one, he gets nicknamed glass ankles forever. But number two, just prior to jumping, someone made the comment, don't go break your other ankle. Why did you say that out loud? So because it was said out loud, did that make it happen? We don't know. But the fact remains that it was on his mind. Sarah, and I'm going to screw up her last name. She's Sarah Sigmundoiter, ranked 37th in at least 3 months ago in CrossFit competition, like world rankings. 2017 fall competition, breaks a rib. She was on the leaderboard, completely gutted, frustrated and sad and tears. And very next competition in spring 2018, she breaks her rib again on the first day. Now, here's the creepy part. Word for word, her words. I've even got it on video on the Netflix special. Her and her personal trainer were joking, wouldn't it suck if I break my rib on the first day of comp? Why say that out loud? Like, because she said it out loud, did that make it happen? We don't know. But the fact remains that it was on her mind. So don't say stupid shit out loud. Leave it all to chance. Like I said, positivity may not work, but negativity always does, and it works negativity. So in our house, no saying stupid shit out loud. Our kids, 10 and 12, they are allowed to say, Dad, don't say stupid shit out loud. It's fair. So really avoiding that negative verbalization. I have negative thoughts every day, but I just don't say them out loud.
Don't amplify them. Don't give them
don't give them power. Don't amplify them. None of that. Okay. Here's the practice that I have, and I picked this up from Dr. May, and she calls it a body-mind scan. So in the military, we have this expression, we're going to go do a recce, a reconnaissance. And a recce, my section did this, and our platoon did this a number of times. A recce is a small group of men, and it's just to sneak around and peek around. It's not to solve problems. It's just to capture information and bring it home. That's it. It's a reconnaissance. So when we do a mind-body scan, every single morning on the way to the gym, I used to listen to music now, or a podcast. Now I don't. It's a body-mind scan. And the first question is, what am I feeling in my body? Well, at 5:30 in the morning, my ankles kind of hurt. My knees kind of hurt. I'm dehydrated. My back's a bit stiff. But that's really about it. I go through my 5 senses. I can hear my own voice. All this is said out loud. I can hear my own voice. I can see the traffic. I can smell. My car smells fine and clean. Nothing smells weird. I can taste the dry mouth, and so I grab a glass of water in the car, drink water, and I can feel the steering wheel. I can feel my leg if I pinch my leg. So it's what am I feeling in my body? Second question is, what am I feeling emotionally? So this morning I was like, you know what? Not really feeling anything. I'm sort of just kind of flatlined. I'm excited for my day because I know this is coming, but that's really kind of it. Cool, that's it. And then what am I thinking about? So this morning I said, well, I'm thinking about some of the notes I want to make sure I get right. I'm thinking about, I want to keep my workout under 45 minutes. I'm thinking about, I should probably tell Danita I'll take Hayden to school this morning. And that's it. All of this is to capture information. None of it's for the purpose of solving anything that pops up. It's just data capture. That's it. And so on the way home from the gym, I'll probably do it again. Throughout the day, I'll probably do it again. In the beginning, it was a bit of a habit to start. I might have only done it once a week, but now I do it multiple times a day. So those, don't say stupid shit out loud, and constantly mind body scan. And, when I come with the mind body scan and I say, oh, that's an interesting thought, I wonder where that came from. This is a pen. This pen isn't you and it's not me. It's a pen. And if I could safely insert it in our heads, well, the, pen's now in our head. Is the pen you? And the answer is no. The pen is a pen. It's just in my head. So it's the same as thoughts. The thoughts are not me, no more like the pen is me. I'm just the first one to hear it. And so instead of acting on my thoughts, I can say, that's a really interesting thought. Or that's a really interesting response. Like say I have an emotional response to something. A guy was speeding this morning on the way to the gym and cut me off. And I was like, you little prick. And I thought, oh, well, that's an interesting response. What are you going to do about it? Well, I'm not going to speed up. I'm just going to drive, So yeah, a couple things. So.
No, I like that. We used to do body scans a lot in treatment, and it's probably a practice that I've fallen out of. So that's a good reminder for me to get back into.
I've started to do it with my children.
Yeah, no, I think that's a habit that can be learned.
What are you thinking? What are you feeling emotionally? What are you feeling in your body? We're just checking out. We're just looking for things. We're not trying to solve anything.
Yeah. And we've got some agreement from our viewers that it is so important, and mindfulness in general. And I think that's probably a different topic for a different day is mindfulness and meditation, and it's like the intersection there. Because there's a lot of interesting research, but there's also so some promising practice around life in general and our level of mindfulness. So, but I won't keep you on too much longer. And
I'd just say that the research that's coming out now, like in real time right now, is phenomenal. What people knew 5 years ago compared to what they know now about neurobiology and psychology, it's so exciting. They're just having some really big wins. And again, all of this stuff is peer reviewed, the stuff that's getting reported on, peer reviewed. And which just means, for those who don't know what that means, is multiple professionals in the industry, whether it's neuroscience or whatever, they can run the same test, or they can run the same protocols and get the exact, very similar exact results. So it's not just one person's idea. Everyone's like, yeah, if I do this, this, and this like you did, I'm finding the exact same results too. That's peer reviewed. And it's phenomenal. Like the research on exercise, the research on meditation, the research on sleep, it's just blowing me away. And I'm my own case study for my clients. I'm not telling my clients anything that I haven't already done.
It is obviously working for you. So awesome. There's a couple of thank yous that I want to throw up on the screen just to acknowledge that we did see him. So Terry says, thanks, Vince. Thanks, Terry, for tuning in.
My pleasure, Terry Becker.
Appreciate it.
Love you, pal.
Ryan says, thank you, Jeff and Vince, for a great talk. Thumbs up. Thank Vince. I just facilitate. I just get him on screen and let him start talking. So thank you, Vince, for
thanks for the swag, Ryan. Love it.
Thanks, Jill, for tuning in, and thank you for your service,
Thank
Vince.
you, Jill.
Her husband served in Africa as well.
Served in Africa as well. There's a few places we've been. Well, thank you for your service to your husband.
John says, thanks, Vince, and he can totally relate. So,
Johnny Odell. Here's the thing about Johnny Odell. I'm 250. I bet Johnny's half my size, not in height, but certainly in weight. And that guy can carry a rucksack equally as heavy as the biggest man in the unit. Like he's from Newfoundland, but he's up in Grand Prairie. And Johnny always had perfect, timely humor and strong as an ox. Nothing got him down. He was so great, just a phenomenal friend, and I'm glad we're in the same province, because that means it's going to be a lot easier for us to cross paths. So
Awesome. Heather says, thanks. Thank you, Heather, for tuning in. Greatly appreciate it. And I'm going to have to pry you for some more stories about Vince at some point. And Judith says, great talk. Thank you, Judith, for tuning in and your questions and coming along for the journey. So
good.
And John's just clarifying, not Newfoundland, Labrador.
Oh, but sorry.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Vince, it's a pleasure as always to talk to you, and thank you for carving out some time, and thank you for your insights, your vulnerability, your showing up as a full person and a full human, and I greatly appreciate having you in my life. And yeah,
likewise.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, my pleasure, Jeff. Thanks for, number one, the invite. Of course, I would support you any day of the week, twice on Sunday. And I would just say that, like, I am who I am because of the community and the people I bring into my inner circle. And you're absolutely one of them. You're wise beyond your years, like literally beyond your years. I'm 50. I think you're 37, and that's not ageism. I'm just saying, like, you have this depth of wisdom and compassion and intimacy and empathy that, and you're equal, like, you're other centric, like, all these things, but the world needs to know that, like, you're one of the greatest human beings in my life. And I am where I am because of some of the great kindness and insights you shared with me. So that cannot go without being said.
Well, you're too kind, and likewise, right back at you.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. Anyone who isn't a client of Vince's, which apparently all of you are, so that's great. But if you're not a client of Vince and you have a business, you're a business owner, you probably should be a client of Vince. So you can check out and learn more about him at vincefowler.ca. And I'll have links in the show notes for people to check out, as well as links to things that Vince mentioned on the podcast, and random, link back to our first episode, our first chat together as well. So check out Vince. And if you want to catch this show or previous shows, you can check out jeffcoulard.com/powerful. That's where I store all of these as audio podcasts, as well as some clips, some snippets out of each conversation in video. So thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. And thank you so much, Vince. And I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
For sure, man. Thanks, pal.